Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is What If Naruto Build Harem with Kurenai and Ayame Part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Naruto turned on the lights to his living room while he motioned for Ayame to take a seat. The brunette silently nodded. Her face was red with embarrassment that her young friend found her at an embarrassing time. She didn't know what to say when he leaned up and moved himself from the couch. Also, did he get taller? Ayame didn't know why she thought it, but Naruto looked very well put together. He always wore that overbearing orange jumpsuit so she never noticed too many physical changes. Yet, now that he was only in a white t-shirt and some boxers, she couldn't deny he looked handsome. Well, handsome in a little brother way. Yeah, let's go with that. Are you hungry? Naruto asked. Slowly, Ayame's face fell. Her mind took her back to her time beneath the Chunin exam stadium and the horrors with it. She remembered herself and 10 other people, including her father, that were stuck in the boiler room. It was easy at first. Wait for the invasion to be over and have someone locate them. That was the plan. However, the young ramen waitress was wholly unprepared for the hell that followed. Ayame remembered the sound of something like thunder. The room shook like a violent earthquake. One of the people had been killed by some debris. It caved his skull in. When the brunette thought about it now, she wondered if he was the lucky one. Once the drama of the first death stopped, that was when everything went downhill. The first day, everyone was scared, tired, and hungry. However, self-preservation kept them all in the boiler room for a few days. It was on the 6th day that 2 people offered to go out and see the situation. Her father was one of them. Ayame pleaded with him not to, but she was lost on the majority. No one else protested. They all thought it was for the best. So, they left. They never came back. That was the beginning of the end of Ayame's world. Days passed and more people tried to leave. Some grew crazy from fear or paranoia. She grabbed an iron pipe to protect herself, praying to the gods to return her father safely. Some people lost their nerve. They ran out of the room and into the darkness. It was only when she heard the sickening screams did she realize something was out there. One of the survivors banged on the door. She screamed for help. Another man opened the door. Ayame would not forget the horror before her when the survivor screamed. A long tendril wrapped around her body. The man tried to help. Believe her, he did. Yet, he didn't seem like the strongest man in the world. The woman screamed before she was pulled back into the abyss. Days passed by, slowly. 10 people became 9. 9 became 7. 7 became 3. 3 became 2. All that was left was Ayame and 1 male survivor. The days turned into weeks. Ayame kept herself from nodding off. She couldn't help it. She didn't know the man. Though she liked to believe in the best of people, something made her scared to fall asleep. Unfortunately, her body prevailed and Ayame nodded off for what she thought was an hour or 2. When she woke up, the man was gone. She remembered how short her breath felt. She remembered how cursed she felt. They were all gone except for her. Her prayers had not been answered. Her father had not returned. Whether by courage or stupidity, the ramen waitress decided to make her own attempt. She opened the door and stared out into the darkness. Slowly, she stepped through its veil. Her steps were an echo. Tears fell down her face as she held the iron pipe. She was scared. She could feel something staring at her, observing her, hunting her. Unfortunately, or fortunately, Ayame lost her nerve. She ran back to the boiler room and closed the door. A thudded bang knocked her from the door to the floor. It followed her. Whatever was out there knew she was in there. It merely waited. Scared, hungry, thirsty, and alone, Ayame hid in the corner of the room. A knock came on the door. Aya, me, a voice cried and cracked. The ramen waitress remembered that voice. It was her father. Despite her excitement, Ayame heard something slithering and slopping against the door. Ah, Ayame. The voice groaned. She peered from the bottom of the door slit. What she saw made her recoil in shock and terror. Her father stood in front of her. Something latched to the back of his neck, feeding black sludge or ooze into his body. He knocked on the door, desperate for her answer. One of his eyes rolled to the side in its socket. He opened his mouth and something crawled out. Ayame backed away from the door. It moved beneath the door. Like some kind of twisted, spider thing, it skittered towards her. Ayame took her pipe and crushed it. She crushed it over, and over, and over until her arms burned. Aya. The voice groaned. Her father was gone. Ayame tried not to sob and make noise. She held in her grief. She then retreated back to the boiler room. There, she hid. The voice went away and it left her alone. As the days went by and her sanity was tested, Ayame wondered how easy it would be to bash her own skull in with that iron pipe. Nevertheless, she couldn't go through with it. She didn't want to die. She wanted to live. She set up a barricade at the front door. That led her to now, sitting in front of her savior, Uzumaki Naruto, and him asking her if she was hungry. She remembered when she looked at him. She thought she was crazy. No one could make it down here. It had to be a lie. She tried to fight. With what energy she had, she fought Naruto. She could feel bad about it now, but that wasn't the case then. It was only when the blonde caught her pipe that she cried. What was the use? She couldn't take it. Everything was shit. Everything turned to shit. If she was going to die, then. Ayame didn't remember the rest. She guessed she passed out because she woke up in Naruto's apartment. She noticed her old clothes were in some dirty clothes hamper. She walked through the room slowly, terrified of the dark. That was until she noticed Naruto's sleeping form. It was real. She survived. It was all because of him, that young boy who stood in the rain, hated by the village. No, I'm not hungry, Ayame replied with her head down. That was a lie. She was so hungry even the table looked appetizing to her, but she couldn't find the will to eat despite how much her stomach growled. She felt like she was about to puke. Naruto stared at Ayame for a little while. Never had he seen the joyous young woman so destroyed. Whatever was down in the Chunin exam stadium had severely traumatized her. He exhaled slowly. Ayame Nichan, you're gonna have to eat, Naruto said rather forcefully. Ayame looked like she wanted to refuse again, so the blonde continued on. I know it's hard, Ayame Nichan, but this isn't our old life anymore. The world's changed, the village is gone, and, anyway, I can't have you getting sick. I'm already taking care of someone else, Datbeo. Don't make me mouth feed you. I'll do it, he warned, a flush of embarrassment on his face. Ayame didn't laugh at the ploy. Though she indeed found it funny, she didn't have the heart to laugh at anything. Her stomach grumbled again. She looked around the room and saw the multitude of supplies Naruto gathered. It seemed he was making the most of his predicament. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki waited in silence for the ramen waitress to respond to him. She kept her head down, her hair shadowing her eyes. The blonde sighed and walked into his kitchen. He opened one of his cupboards and pulled out 2 or 3 bentos with plastic-wrapped sandwiches. Naruto placed 2 in front of Ayame and the other in front of himself. I can't make it hot, but at least it's not cold, he said. He supposed it was rather late to be eating, but, fuck it. He was hungry. Naruto ate from the box slowly. He never took his eyes off his friend. Not once did she reach for her food. She sat still like a statue. The young genin stopped eating. He frowned. His first piece of human contact in over 2 weeks. This wasn't how he thought it would go. Naruto, Ayame spoke. The young man looked up from his food. You told me my father sent you to me. He's dead, isn't he? That thing took him. She sobbed out. Her body trembled and shook. She clenched the clothes Naruto made her wear. The Uzumaki boy clenched his chopsticks. His right hand covered his face. He pulled at his cheeks angrily. He's resting, Ayame Nichan. And no one can hurt him anymore. I swear. The blonde replied. The brunette placed her head in her hands. Her cries filled the living room. Naruto walked over to Ayame and held her in his arms. He tried his best to soothe her with words. His hands again moved through her hair. He didn't know what it was like to lose a parent, but he knew what it was like to lose someone precious. He too had lost so many of the important people in his life. Even now, the pain was still there for him as well, but he had to be strong. He couldn't afford to be that naive, stupid Naruto that so many claimed he was. He made a promise to himself and to Tsuki to be better. I'll protect you, Ayame Nichan. I promise, Naruto exclaimed. He held her tighter as she sobbed into his chest. After some time, Ayame's stomach growled again. She drove her head into Naruto's chest. She really wished it would stop doing that. It was embarrassing enough to die. The brunette pulled back and turned to her food. She slowly picked up the chopsticks. She unwrapped the sandwich and took a bite. She smiled. It tasted good. For her, who hadn't eaten in 2 weeks, this sandwich was restaurant quality. She opened her bento and proceeded to eat the contents in there as well. That tasted delicious as well. While they ate, Naruto and Ayame traded information. Unfortunately, neither had answers about what happened. Both told the other where they had been when the giant rock fell from the skies. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki offered, as best he could, an overview of the world outside. Acid rain, hot weather, blowing sands, extremely cold weather, and anything else that might be important. Ayame certainly was impressed. Naruto proved himself to be quite capable despite the circumstances. I'll go over my plans with you tomorrow. Now that you're awake, that opens up some options for me, Naruto stated. He was already thinking of the advantages to having someone else conscious in the room. Alright, I'd like that. And, thanks for saving me, Naruto-kun, the young woman replied. Naruto scratched his cheek and chuckled. Why yeah, no problem, he said as he continued to eat. By the time they were done, the blonde gawked when he saw Ayame finish 5 bento lunches and 3 more plastic-wrapped sandwiches. Where the hell did she put all of that? Thankfully, Ayame had the decency to look sheepish about it. After that, they retired to bed. Naruto turned out the lights and moved back to the couch. With a full stomach, he fell back asleep. About an hour or two later, he was slowly shaken awake. He opened his eyes. What's wrong, Ayame Nichan? The Kyuubi Jinchuriki asked. Naruto-kun, would you please, stay with me tonight? I can't sleep, she said. The blonde was going to protest, but he felt the shiver in her hand. He also noticed the sweat on her face. Though it was dark, he wondered why he could see her so clearly. Her eyes darted around the room frantically. She was scared of the dark. Yeah, he said. He got out off the couch and followed Ayame back to his bedroom. Just for thorough sake, he checked Kurenai. Nothing was out of the ordinary, so he left her alone. He crawled into the futon with the ramen waitress. She held him as close as she could. She didn't know why, but he smelled good. As for Naruto, he shivered in embarrassment. Ayame's body was very warm and soft. This is gonna be a long night, he thought to himself. Thankfully, the embarrassment gave way to tiredness. Ayame nuzzled her chin into Naruto's hair while she kept him close. Naruto closed his eyes and drifted off to sleep. The former slowly closed her eyes as well, hopeful that when she opened them this wouldn't be a dream her mind made up. The Uzumaki household slowly grew quiet as the sounds of fierce, cold winds blew outside. The next morning, Naruto spent 1 to 2 hours giving Ayame a rundown of the house and the supplies. He showed her where the bathwater and bathroom supplies were. He showed her where the food, clothes for men and women, and other supplies were stored. He took her from his apartment and into the other ones he used since no one else was using them. Unfortunately, the apartment complex's electrical power was out, so there was no way to heat up the food easily. So, he taught her the trick he used to do so. The brunette once again found herself impressed by the resourcefulness of her young friend. Then again, though the thought depressed her, perhaps a young boy used to living on the streets would have some better instincts in these kinds of circumstances. Once the young man finished the crash course into the tour of his apartment, they decided on breakfast. So, these clothes you gave me. I don't remember putting them on before I fell asleep, Ayame said. Naruto paused in eating. He stared at Ayame's intense gaze. A blush appeared on his face as he turned his head to the side. Why yeah, I changed you out of your old clothes. Look, I had to. Who knows what was down there and if it got on your clothes. You'd get sick too, then I'd be taking care of Kurenai-san and you. It wasn't. I didn't mean, he stammered. Ayame shook her head, a small smile upon her face. I'm joking, Naruto. You don't have to explain. I know you did it for my benefit. I'm sure Kurenai-san will understand as well. If it's all the same to you though, I'll take over washing Kurenai and changing our clothes, she replied. The young Uzumaki breathed easy. He quickly nodded. He had already seen enough to last the rest of his life. Especially from two beautiful women like these. Why yeah, you do that. Actually, with that being the case now, I want to go over some things with you, he said seriously. The Ichiraku waitress took note of his gaze and agreed. She continued eating while Naruto pulled out his map. He laid it across the table. Ayame stared at the map. She looked at the many markings the whiskered blonde made on it. All the locations he had been to were listed with some kind of label. Food. Come back later. More water. Base. He's very thorough. More than I thought, Ayame said to herself. Her eyes moved to the right and she noticed the large X across the Chunin exam stadium. A shiver ran through her spine. A prayer to the gods above, she hoped she would never need a reason to go back there. Mostly, I've kept to these areas. I tried to stay close to Kurenai-san since I was the only one looking after her. The Chunin exam stadium was the furthest I ever went. There's still a lot of places in the village I haven't gotten to yet and looted. Most of the civilian districts Naruto didn't finish. By this point, Ayame knew where he was going with this. I see. Now that I'm awake, you're confident to be out longer. Do you really have to be though? We have enough right here, she claimed. Naruto sighed sadly. Nothing lasts forever, Ayame Nichan. Everything we've got here is bound to expire eventually. Plus, my apartment isn't stable. There's gonna come a day where even it's gonna crash to the ground like other buildings. I've got to find us someplace else before that happens. That was why I came to the Chunin exam stadium in the first place. Now that that's not an option, we'll have to look somewhere else. We might even have to leave Konoha, he replied. Though she desired to protest, Ayame knew Naruto was right. Though shocked that he would think of deserting the place he called home, she couldn't fault him for the thought. Each time she looked outside, it hammered into her head that her village had become a vessel of the Shinigami. Death and desolation laid everywhere. Ayame had seen the bodies. She saw what Naruto saw, the numerous corpses and bones carried off by the wind. Ravenous tornadoes blew in the distance while lightning struck the ground and trees, creating fires wherever there was wood. The same things, Ayame mumbled. Huh? Naruto asked. The ramen waitress trembled. You're saying almost the same things my dad said, Naruto. He left and didn't come back. What if you don't come back either? What if there's more of those things out there? Everyone's dead. If you die too, then I can't, Ayame replied. Suddenly, the ramen waitress stopped. Naruto's hand rested on her shoulder. She stared up at him. His blue eyes stared into her dark ones. All right then, let's make a deal, Ayame Nichan, Naruto said. The ramen waitress blinked. A deal? She asked. Naruto nodded. Give me a reason to make it back alive, Datbeo. When I come back home, I want you to say, "Welcome home," to me. No one's ever said that to me before. I'll make sure not to die if I get to hear those words, he answered. Despite the sadness running through her, Ayame couldn't help but smile. All right, it's a deal, she said. Once that was concluded, Naruto said that he would spend the next 2 days at home. He called it a break for himself. Naturally, Ayame held no reservations against it. So, Naruto continued to make plans for those 2 days while Ayame took over as Kurenai's caretaker. She would update the blonde on the Jonin's progress. Additionally, Naruto had also been designated as Ayame's security blanket, so to speak. Her own words, not his. One night, Ayame woke up in a violent scream which caused Naruto to bulldoze into the room. Since then, Naruto became the young woman's official bed partner. Indeed, it took some getting used to for both, but it was either this or a nighttime of screaming. Neither desired that. The only problem was, Naruto was still a man, a very young man at that. He and Ayame made the silent vow to just never talk about the mourning state of men that they encountered together those days. Though embarrassed, Ayame was not unused to these moments. She had shared a few awkward incidents that involved her father and wrong place, wrong time moments. Either way, they put it behind each other. Once his 2 days of rest were over, Naruto got dressed in his usual gear. He looked out the window. It was another windy day. Much more ferocious than the last 2 days. A sharp boom of thunder made him jump. His heart leapt into his throat before he breathed easily. The last 2 days almost seemed like a peaceful dream to help him forget about the hell he was willingly walking back into. You have food, water, your weapons? Ayame asked. Yes, and yes, Naruto said as he pulled up the door that blocked the outside. He stared back at the ramen waitress. Her hesitancy was obvious, but she couldn't bring up the words to convey her thoughts. Instead, she waved him off. He placed on his goggles and waved her goodbye. He ran out his door. He hopped on the apartment fence and dashed off through the dusty winds and arid air. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki landed on a rooftop. He kicked open the rooftop door and stepped inside. He pulled out his map and grabbed his flashlight. Alright, while Ayame Nichan takes care of Kurenai-san, I can head into the shinobi district. I'll need some scrolls, kunai, shuriken, exploding tags, and anything else I can carry. I could head to the Konoha Bank as well. If I'm lucky, some of the storage scrolls should still work. I think I've got my chakra back. Should I test it out? Naruto thought. He stared at the wall. He then channeled some chakra into his feet. He pressed his foot against the wall and tried to climb. HNNNGH. Naruto placed his hand over his mouth to prevent the sound of his pain from leaking out. If more things like that thing in the dark at the stadium existed, then he'd rather not alert them. Okay. Chakra's still a no-go, he groaned before he stood up. Alright, with that little experiment out of the way, Naruto marked his map with a marker and placed it back in his bag. He then entered outside and ran across the rooftops. The run to the shinobi district took much longer than Naruto thought. That was because mountains of crushed homes and buildings blocked many different paths. The sand and wind started to create sand dunes. They covered the debris. In time, Naruto feared that the people who had yet to come into the world would see nothing of Konoha. All they would see was an endless desert and scorching heat. It certainly didn't help that the lightning struck some of the wood. That caused it to burst in flames, and those flames would be carried off by the wind in heaps of black smoke. The flames would latch onto buildings and burn them down as well. Whoever was inside, whatever was inside, it didn't matter. It all burned away and the sand would cover the remains. That was all that would be left. Nothing. An hour of rooftop travel passed. Naruto passed by the exam stadium wearily. Nothing happened that caused him too much concern before he finally made it into the shinobi district. When he landed there, Naruto felt queasy. No, he felt disgusted. No, he felt agony. Yeah, agony. That was a good word to use when he saw the flies and maggots buzzing around the endless piles of broken, torn, and mutilated flesh of shinobi men, women, and children. Hundreds of corpses laid around the area like a flowing river of dried red blood. Arms, guts, intestines, and stripped sinew decorated the homes, shops, and rooftops in some sort of nightmare story that adults tell their children about to behave. The smell was absolutely detestable. Rotting and decomposed flesh laid everywhere. Shinobi of Konoha, Oto, and Suna laid together. Hell, so mangled and torn were the bodies that Naruto couldn't even tell the allies from the enemies. Then, there were the animals. The summons of those killed in combat laid along with their masters. Naruto saw more than a few canines from the Inuzuka clan. Their corpses were stripped of fur and skin, which left only a barely recognized skeleton. Some of the bones had obviously been blown away. Some of the innards even started growing some type of mold or fungus spores. Weird, creepy plants started growing from the carnage in front of him. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki held his head down. He had cried enough. Yet the grotesque scene before him made his chest hurt. Well, it was either that or the soreness from his training a few days ago. He'd rather think it was this. The young genin tightened his mask over his mouth. I'll probably have to find a gas mask. I don't wanna inhale whatever's down there, Dadbeo, Naruto thought to himself. Having decided that the blonde ran over a few rooftops until he found a place where the death and guts weren't so concentrated. He landed in the streets. There was no noise except for the wind and howl of the storms. Places where people laughed and enjoyed walks with their families were not but a distant memory now. Naruto stepped through the shinobi district. He picked up fallen kunai and shuriken. So many were there that he had to stop. His bags were already getting full and he had yet to be in a store. On the bright side, he did grasp a few scrolls, but he didn't know exactly what they were for. Finally, when his backpacks were half full, Naruto made it to a shinobi store. The window displays were broken through and glass littered the ground. At least he didn't have to worry about breaking in. Slowly, the blonde stepped over the glass and landed inside. Just like every other store he visited, the store was dark. Broken shelves of kunai, swords, and other precious shinobi weapons laid everywhere. There was a distant howl through the upper levels of the shop that unnerved him. His breath against the cloth of his mask felt warm. He unzipped his backpack and pulled out a list. Okay. First things first, storage scrolls. They're convenient and light. Plus, they store a lot. That could help in keeping food fresh, though I've never tested it myself. Well, it's not like any of the uncooked food I've found has been edible, Naruto thought. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki walked through the room and found the scrolls meant for storing in no time. It was no surprise, they were fairly common after all. I grabbed one of the scrolls and opened it. Yosh, that formula stuff on the scroll is still here. I can. Suddenly, Naruto stopped his thought. He stared at the formula drawn on the paper. Green chakra leaked from his body. Into the air it swirled before it wrapped itself around the pupils of his eyes. The longer his eyes stared at the formula, the more he felt he understood it. Every nook and cranny of the storage formula. Like a voice in his head, he found he understood everything that was being given to him. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki dropped the scroll and it fell with a thud. What was that? He thought. He slowly grabbed the scroll and opened it again. Nothing happened. He examined the scroll for about 5 minutes, but nothing occurred. In fact, he wondered if he hallucinated the entire ordeal. He opened the scroll again and there was nothing out of the ordinary. With a shake of his head, the young man touched the formula on the scroll. He poured his chakra into it and he shivered. His hands gained a green aura. It was that green chakra from before. He watched it pour into the seal. After a moment, a puff of smoke threw him off. Yosh. It worked. Naruto thought. On the floor laid 5 kunai in 5 wrapped sets, 5 shuriken in 5 wrapped sets, and a bottle of soldier pills. Naruto quickly resealed them into the scroll. Yet, he noticed something strange. Was the scroll's edge always green? He thought. The sound of a clanging shook Naruto from his question. Whatever, at least it all worked. Swiftly, the blonde grabbed all of the scrolls he could get from the store. It had quite a few of them too. Enough to fill up a whole backpack. That said, he would have to come back on a second, third, or even fourth trip. Some of the scrolls were too big to fit in a backpack. Still, with what he had, he got to work. He sealed up all the kunai, shuriken, weapons, swords, tags, and other supplies from at least 3 or 4 shinobi stores. Good thing the space inside a storage seal could hold at least a closet full of stuff. That made this venture a lot easier. That said, Naruto began to notice that he hadn't been dreaming or hallucinating. The outline of the storage scrolls started turning green whenever he used his chakra on them. He knew because one had a red design on it. Once he filled it with his chakra, it turned green. He had no answers to why this was the case, but he couldn't stop now. After some time, Naruto decided to take a break. He downed some water and snacked on a bento far away from the shinobi district. He had just finished his lunch when he shivered. "Help me," a voice called, its voice carried by the wind. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki glanced left. He then glanced right. He saw nothing for miles. "Help me." The young shinobi jumped when he heard a metal trash can fall from around the corner. He stared at the trash can. There were bite marks on it. He then heard something fall over in the distance. Naruto quickly grew concerned. He felt something was wrong. Despite his desire to help or his hope at finding survivors, Naruto worked his brain hard. He couldn't do this stupidly or like he usually would. He had to be careful. He quickly packed up his things and stood up. He then entered the streets once again. He pulled up the gas mask he found in one of the shinobi stores and slowly entered into the valley of death that was the deeper parts of the shinobi district. Due to the mask, Naruto's breath echoed through his ears. Each step, a trudge through some type of body part that he couldn't name. He had his hand on his kunai pouch constantly. He carried over 1,000 weapons in scrolls. Yet, he did not feel safe. In fact, he felt less safe than back in the stadium. Naruto couldn't explain why, but, deep in this dusty mist, eyes were on him. No, it wasn't like back in the stadium. It was something more sinister, primal, unhindered. The feel of 1,000 eyes on him as he moved. "Help me," the voice called. Its sound was like a cold blade on the back of a hot neck. Ever since Naruto had rescued Ayame, he made conditions for himself. 3 conditions that he hoped would keep him alive. 3 conditions that told him if he could stay or run. He inhaled and exhaled. His breath was not, but the wind was cold. Naruto felt his foot squish against something wet, but he was too afraid to look down at it. The kunai in his hand shook from the unease he felt in his body. The dust grew thicker. The sounds of the storms, though he was outside, sounded so far away. The young Uzumaki stopped. In the middle of the road, where mountains and hills of shinobi corpses laid, he heard something clawing against the stone walls in the distance. The dust was thick. It was so thick he couldn't even see through it despite channeling chakra through his eyes. "Help me," the voice called. This time, it sounded familiar, eerily familiar. In a moment of nervousness, Naruto got out of the middle of the streets. He dashed into one of the alleyways. With his back pressed against the wall, he swallowed the unease in his throat. His grip on the kunai's handle was nigh suffocating. Sweat poured down the side of his face. What if there's more of those things out there? Everyone's dead. The memory of Ayame's words made him shudder. He wasted no time. He wrapped an explosion tag around a kunai. He tried not to make any noise. More than that, he hoped the wind would cover his tracks. He grabbed a shuriken. He saw a can in the distance. He threw the shuriken and quickly hid behind his spot. The weapon struck the can with a resounding smack before it fell to the ground. He heard nothing except for the sound of claws scratching on stone. It sounded just like that way one of those female teachers at the academy scratched the chalkboard with their nails. He peeked around the corner again. There it went. It was fast, but Naruto saw it. Something on 4 legs, with an arched back, and crooked hands sped through the sand. It was too far away to accurately tell, but the Kyuubi Jinchuriki knew that it wasn't human. What was that? Naruto thought. He weighed his options. At this point, he'd been given enough incentive to call it quits for one day. He didn't necessarily need to extend his hand even further. However, if he could gather information and observe the surroundings, then that would make it easier to come back here later. He quietly took out his map. The Konoha Bank was further that way. That was also where the more expensive and top-grade shinobi items laid. If he, Ayame, and Kurenai ever did leave Konoha, then the jewels, gems, and ryo stored in the bank might become valuable trading goods with people outside the village. Granted, Naruto didn't have much business sense, but even he understood how many men lost their lives over money. He saw it all the time as he grew up around the red light district. Drunks, gamblers, prostitutes, drug addicts waiting for their next fix, all ruined themselves for money. The bank of a population the size of Konoha, it was worth the risk. Alright, I'll stay for now. Plus, I should investigate that call for help. But why didn't that person I saw in the distance respond to the... Naruto stopped his thought. His eyes widened. He felt something wet soak into his clothes. At first, he thought it was rain. Knowing what he knew now, the rain would have been a gift from Kami herself rather than this. No, what landed on his shoulder was slick, gooey, and sticky. It looked like black saliva. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki's first instinct was to run, to turn his head and see what caused the stuff dripping on his shoulder, but he didn't listen. In fact, he did the craziest thing. Whether by his fear, or the primal instincts within him, he stood still. Against the wall, he did not move. He could hear the beat of his own chest through his gas mask. The enclosed space around his head felt claustrophobic. RRRRAAEEK. Naruto's ears picked up a new noise. This was no animal's noise. It was a sound he had never heard before. The sound of claws crawled on the wall beside him. The alleyway in front of him felt tight. Blood pumped from his brain to his chest. Heal LLLP me. The blonde heard the cry for help over the hot air. He tried to tune it out. He closed his eyes. He wanted to steady his breathing. If he didn't, he feared that whatever was around him would hear the sounds in his chest. Slowly, the sounds stopped. Naruto opened his eyes. Do not ask him how he didn't scream that day. Perhaps the horror was so great it robbed him of his voice. Perhaps the depths of his mind hadn't processed the warped creature in front of him. Perhaps nothing could surprise him anymore. That last one was up for debate. Either way, the young genin was not prepared to handle the creature that stood in front of him. It had no eyes. Its face was covered by what looked like some excess skin from its forehead. What passed for a mouth was a series of long, black hair-like tissues that flapped in the wind. Long, black claws and bony arms scraped the sides of the wall. It walked on its hind legs. The creature was almost human-like, but it crawled in such a way that would drive most people insane. Its back like that of a lizard. Fresh skin-covered bones resembling scales lined its frame. Tiny points of needle-like appendages jutted out from the skin at unnatural points. Its tail was like an amalgamation of corrupted flesh and bone. All that, and there was still one other thing. It wasn't alone. 2 more clung to the walls of the alleyway in front of the blonde. He could also hear about 3 more on the same wall that he laid. It didn't seem like they saw him. They looked around, almost like they were trying to smell something out. Naruto heard the thuds of something heavy. It sounded like rolling balls of some sort. They rolled in front of his gas mask. One of the creatures screeched as the objects fell in front of the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Please believe him. Please believe him. Please fucking believe him that he tried hard not to cry. He tried so damn hard not to cry when he saw the heads of at least 5 or 6 shinobi rolling in a pile by the wind. Their eyes were eaten, their faces hollow with open sockets and tongueless mouths. Naruto recognized some of them, but there was one he recognized the most. He had gone to school with her. She was always quiet. She never could speak up. In my eyes, you're a proud failure. When I look at you, I get an intense feeling in my heart, because you're not perfect, because you fail, you have the strength to get back up, because I believe that is what true strength is. She always fainted whenever she saw him. She allowed him to cheat off her test. She always encouraged him even when someone like Sakura never would. I will never go back on my word, because that too is my ninja way. She had been hospitalized from her fight with Neji Hyuga. Yes, the blonde bit his lips so hard it bled to keep the sobs under control. The head of Hinata Hyuga, the former heiress of the Hyuga clan, rolled in front of him along with a group of other genin that he had gone to the academy with. Her eyeless head and open mouth left no wonders to her fate. The only solace made afforded to him was that maybe she had died before this gruesome fate befell her. Yet, even so, the desecration of her body made him tremble. Kill you. I'll fucking kill you for this. I'll fucking kill all of you, so fucking help me. Naruto thought. He could feel his chakra going wild. Red and green chakra blasted from his body and scrapped the walls. Grayake. The creatures shrieked their unholy wails in Naruto's ears. Clearly, they reacted to the negative rage in the air while his chakra spiraled out of control. His eyes gained a deep red hue. His whiskers grew more profound. His nails sharpened. He desired nothing more than to rip them all to pieces. Yet, somehow he could tell. The one looking through him might have actually been looking at him. Somewhere in its corrupted brain, it knew something was in front of it. It wanted him to attack. He could tell because its twisted mouth formed a cracked grin of malice. It bared its teeth below the black hair strands above its lip. Its head tilted to the side inquisitively. Help me. With every fiber in his being, by the very vow he made for himself to protect Ayame and survive in this world, Naruto closed his eyes and calmed himself down. Kakashi, Iruka, and many others always told him he was too hot-headed and impulsive. Despite the shock, anger, and fear while he stared at Hinata's severed head, he didn't lash out. For one, these creatures had somehow gotten this close to him without him knowing. That meant that they had either tailed him for a while, or they were just that good at stealth. Naruto had to guess on the latter since there shouldn't be a reason why they didn't attack him. Second, he didn't know how many there were. He could see the 3 in front of him. The one standing before him, and the 2 on the alley wall. Something told him there was more. That meant, they were pack hunters. No different from lions and wolves. They usually had a leader, but Naruto knew next to nothing about how they structured themselves. Okay, I'll just take into account what I do know. They seem blind. They don't have any ears that I can see, so they must be deaf. So, why are they standing in front of me? What are they waiting for? Naruto thought. He slowly raised his left hand. One of the creatures tilted its head in that direction. Raaaaaaaaaaaeek. The leader screamed. The one on the wall stopped moving. It was then that Naruto saw it. It was very small, but he could make out the green chakra flowing around the bodies of the creatures. It wasn't individual. It was all linked together like some flaring web of fire. For a moment, the blonde moved his eyes a little. He noticed one of his arms was covered in the same green chakra as the creatures. What's going on? Why is my chakra green? Naruto thought as he looked at his hand. While the Kyuubi Jinchuriki contemplated this, there suddenly came a loud rumble. The ground trembled as corpses fell over and buildings crashed into each other. A massive earthquake rolled through the former village hidden in the leaves. The creatures wailed and ran off, leaving Naruto alone with the heads of those who had been killed, and the head of his former classmate. The rumbling grew stronger. Naruto watched in shock as tall buildings broke beneath the weight of their rusted base. They crashed down. Their thunderous might only added to the roar of the shaking ground. It didn't take long for the young man to fall to his knees. His face hit the dirt as the skies grew dark. The land exploded in bouts of hot steam and fire. A fissure line tore through the middle of the shinobi district, swallowing up all the bodies and the fallen buildings. Those buildings that still stood were not safe either. Lightning struck the ground with such fire and fury, nothing in sections of the village could survive it. Not even Naruto was able to get up in time before he screamed as the ground opened up and devoured him. He screamed as he bashed against the side of a rock wall. He grabbed a ledge, but it was too slippery. He fell off and felt the wind blast out his lungs when his back crashed against a pillar of rock. Down and down, Naruto fell. His clothes tore and he tried to block anything from hitting his face. The wind from the wall pushed against his face before he slammed down into the ground below. Even then, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki couldn't stay down. He limped away from the falling boulders and sharp-edged cliffs that fell off the side. Dare he say this was even worse than the time he got pushed off that open cliff by that perverted sage. Naruto leaned against the wall in the dark. The rumbling continued. Between the falling corpses, those bodies being buried beneath mounds of rock and stone from buildings, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki wondered if he really wouldn't see Ayame again. After about 3 or 4 minutes, the shaking stopped. Naruto opened his eyes. He was in the dark. The only thing illuminating his place was the giant hole far above him. Worry for Ayame and Kurenai filled his body. If he had felt that earthquake, then what about them? Kuso, I gotta get up. Naruto groaned to himself while he clutched his shoulder in pain. With a heavy grunt of pain, he realigned his broken shoulder and panted. Yeah, tomorrow was a day off, most definitely. Naruto noticed the destruction in front of him. A large pile of debris and corpses laid in front of him. When he looked forward, there, almost mockingly, he saw the head of Hinata. Of course, he would have to see it. Why did he have to see it again? Someone had to be fucking with him. The young man turned away. He feared that if he looked at her anymore, he just might take his own life right then and there. That was another one of his friends that didn't make it. Who was fucking left? What was the point in even asking that question? Maybe he was the only one left. Sakura, Sasuke, Kakashi, what would he do if he saw even one of them? Could he even stomach that? For Ayame, for Kurenai, he thought he could. He hoped he could, but he didn't know if he would be able to. Though he hated Sasuke, he didn't want him to die. Sakura wasn't the nicest. Okay, she was kind of an at times, but it was true she kept him in line. He definitely did stupid stuff sometimes. Kakashi, though he was late all the time, he was still reliable. Naruto stared up at the cavern walls. No doubt they were slippery. It was just like back in the cliff when Jiraiya pushed him off. He had tried to stick to help his fall, but the spikes were too smooth. He had no doubts the same applied to now. Plus, the last time he tried to climb a wall he fell on his ass. He stared at the wall and gathered his chakra. It was strange. His body felt cold this time. It was almost freezing even. He stared at his palm. More green chakra exuded from his skin. Where did this even come from? Had he gained it from trying to unlock his chakra from a few days ago? He crossed his fingers. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, he called out. He felt the chakra spike in his body, but he was down the 30 clones he'd envisioned. What the hell kind of chakra is this? Shouldn't all chakra help make a jutsu? Why can't I do it? Naruto growled out. This felt even worse than back in the academy. Okay, fine. Fuck the jutsu. He channeled the green chakra to his feet. He then pressed his foot to the wall. Gah! Naruto groaned as fell back on his head. In frustration, the young Uzumaki uttered every single curse word he could think of off the top of his lips. Was something actually fucking with his life more than they already had? What chakra doesn't allow someone to do the most basic shinobi shit? Naruto had done this exercise plenty of times. Why? Why were so many things going wrong today? The blonde dropped to his knees. No, that wasn't the question. It was all wrong. Everything about this world was wrong. The earth, his life, his friends, the village, it was all wrong. He raised his fist to hit something, whether it be the ground, the wall, or himself. He lowered his fist. Sigh. What was the point in even getting angry? It wouldn't bring his friends back and it would stop this ceasing dread deep in his mind. All he could do was press on. Suddenly, Naruto cursed and slammed his neck. Something bit him. He looked down and he frowned. A bug? Man, good thing Shino's not here. He'd kill me for this, Naruto thought. He then jumped when he felt something crawl on his leg. What the fuck? Naruto exclaimed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his flashlight. When he turned it on, he saw an abnormally large centipede slowly moving up his leg. Hey, get the fuck off me. I ain't your blood bank, Datbeo. Naruto claimed. He kicked the arthropod away from him. It bounced on the ground before he heard it creak and skitter. He jumped and smacked the side of his cheek. Another insect. Suddenly, Naruto felt dizzy. He fell back against the wall. A horrid realization rose through his body. He felt something crawl on his arm. The blonde genin smacked his arm against the wall. This time a large leech was knocked off, blood seeped from the side of his shoulder. His fingers twitched. This time, dread filled his body when he smacked his arm. Another blood-sucking insect. Only this time, he hadn't felt it. It was like the feeling in his body had left him. Worry filled Naruto. He had to get the hell out of here. Naruto wiggled his body free as best he could. He didn't stop to think about the who's or the what's. He just went. Fuck the chakra. He grabbed two kunai and stabbed them into the wall. Over and over, he stabbed them as he pulled himself up. He shivered when he heard something creep and crawl in the walls. The harsh buzzing of large insects roared in his ears like blasting fans. His body sore and his senses leaving him, Naruto continued to climb. He realized he must have gotten bit somewhere because he nearly slipped. He was having a hard time judging how much strength to use. It felt like his arms were going to sleep. Something bit his boot and he kicked it off. He didn't know what it was, but he wasn't taking any chances. Sharp buzzing filled his ears again. He looked and he gawked. Something with the elongated beak of a hawk, arms of an insect, and wings of a bat flew at him. It screeched so loudly he was surprised his ears didn't bleed. Naruto took out a canister of oil and a match. He lit the match on fire with the wall. He then filled his mouth with oil and spat it into the match. A wave of flames danced in front of him as he burned the numerous bugs in front of him. The flying beast screamed at him before it flew back. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki continued climbing. His breath was hot. His vision was dazed. The light out of this hole he'd found himself in merely seemed like a tiny bulb. He couldn't feel his fingers. He actually slipped and fell off about 3 times, but he pushed on. He couldn't die here. He wouldn't. He had a reason to go back home now. In an instant, the blonde grimaced in pain. He grabbed his shirt and pulled it up. Another leech. He grabbed it and yanked it off. He threw it away and he continued climbing. Don't ask the Kyuubi Jinchuriki how long he climbed. He wasn't sure. All he knew was that through the pain, dizziness, and deliriousness, he was only a few climbs out of the fissure. He climbed as the buzzing around him seemed so far away. In fact, it sounded rather pleasant to fall asleep to. It was pretty nice. Wake the fuck up, brat. Are you trying to get us killed? A violent roar deep in Naruto's mind jolted him awake. His body was woozy, but he felt something in his right hand. He turned his head and the shock nearly made him fall. Squirming in his grasp was the large insect that had been waiting so patiently to pluck his flesh from his bones when he fell asleep. It was official. Uzumaki Naruto was fucking fed up. A blast of red chakra exploded from his body while green chakra circled around his eyes. He stared at the large insectoid. Fuck off, he snarled. His chakra flared violently. Like a maelstrom of angry tails, they bashed around the fissure walls. Bugs were lit aflame and fell down into the hole where he just was. With any strength he could muster, he slammed the bug into the wall once, twice, thrice. It screamed and screeched in anger at him before he ripped off one of its wings. He then threw it down. This is the last time I help you, brat. If you want strength, then work at it on your own. The voice said before it faded away. With a sigh of tiredness and filled with stress, Naruto climbed out of the fissure. The hot wind and dusty air blew in his face while he panted. He could barely hear the sounds of thunder outside while tornadoes rampaged in the distance. The young man grabbed his backpacks and walked away. An unholy scream made him move a bit faster. Absently, he heard a sharp sound of falling rocks and quaking earth from the fissure he'd just left. A heavy crash was heard behind him, but he didn't turn around to see what. He doubted his legs would have listened to him anyway. How much time passed? Minutes? Hours? Days? Naruto didn't know the answer to those questions. All he knew was that he made it to his apartment complex. He slowly walked up the stairs and stumbled to his room. His body banged against the railing while sweat dripped from his head. He banged on his apartment door. That was all he could manage before he fell over and passed out. Before his world went black, he heard Ayame scream. Naruto! She exclaimed. Naruto opened his eyes. He absently heard the sound of acid rain outside. The harsh sounds of blowing wind and steaming rain rolled him this way and that. He noticed his vision was no longer blurry. It was dark outside. Feeling returned to his hands and arms. A few places on his body had been bandaged as well. He slowly leaned up. He was on the futon that he and Ayame used for sleep. He survived. Once again, he survived. He held up his arm. Green chakra. He'd have to learn how to use it. It wouldn't do well for this house if you fall as well, Naruto. You should take better care of yourself. Surprised by the noise, Naruto turned in its direction. His eyes widened when he saw Kurenai smile from where she laid on his bed. She didn't seem fully awake. Like him, her eyes were a bit hazy. Her voice was also raspy. The blonde stuttered, his voice slurry. Indeed. I understand I have you to thank for my well-being. It's good to see a familiar face, Kurenai said with a tired smile. As much as Naruto wished to say the same. Unfortunately, he couldn't. Thoughts of Hinata and Kiba quickly filled his head. He held his head down. Kurenai-san, Naruto tried to speak, but no words came out. He opened and closed his mouth so many times he wondered if he looked like a gaping fish. For once in his life, the young genin was at a complete loss on what to do or say. What was he supposed to tell Kurenai? What could he say? Hey, Kurenai-san, sorry I just found 2 of your genin cell. Yeah, they're both dead. Sorry about that. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki finally just held his head down. Never mind. I'll tell you later, he said pitifully. Kurenai stared at Naruto curiously. She didn't miss the looks of horror, shame, and guilt written across his face. She'd seen the look many times in her career as a kunoichi. She saw the eyes of a very tired and crestfallen shinobi. She saw someone who had seen too much and received too little. She wondered what he had to say, but she could already tell it wasn't anything good. Though this concerned her, Kurenai didn't push it. She was never the type of person to force an issue that no one wanted to bring up. She'd woken up a bit before Naruto returned home. She made some small talk with Ayame about the world. She didn't know much. The last thing Kurenai remembered was fighting about 5 or 6 Otosuna shinobi in the streets. Then, a rock the likes of which she had never seen crashed into the earth. The ground shook like it was being torn to pieces. The pain and injuries she endured had knocked her out. She couldn't even say she woke up because her vision was blurry. She felt like she was constantly on the line between life and death for over a week. When she fully became aware of herself, she was in Naruto's apartment under warm blankets. Kurenai asked about the Otosuna invasion of Konoha, but Ayame merely shook her head. She opened the windows and told Kurenai that even if the invasion force won, there wouldn't be much for them to gain from their victory. The Genjutsu mistress would not forget the shock on her face when she stared into the vast nothingness of her village. Skies filled with putrid greenish-yellow dust clouds, sounds of drumming thunder, flashes of purple lightning, and tornadoes swirling angrily in the distance, she saw them all. Kurenai questioned if this was actually the end of the world or not. She asked Ayame question after question, but each only seemed to stress out the ramen waitress. The look on the poor young girl's face. She looked absolutely terrified and psychologically scarred. The Jonin quickly swapped topics. She asked Ayame if she had rescued her, but the girl said that she hadn't. Kurenai was in Naruto's bed long before Ayame got there. He was the one who had rescued her and nursed her back to health. To say Kurenai was stunned was an understatement. Forgive her previous assumptions, but she didn't expect such a thing from what the academy deemed a failure. Hell, even his win against Kiba astounded her. His win against Neji, well, she basically just threw out everything she thought she knew about Uzumaki Naruto. She now saw what attracted Hinata to him. He might not be a genius by society's definition, but not many people could think and plan the way he did. Kurenai also noticed that her old clothes, covered in blood, were near a dirty clothes pile. Ayame claimed that Naruto found her before the ramen waitress. If that was the case, then Kurenai was going to close her eyes and sigh away the embarrassment. She had a feeling she knew where her thoughts were going. If Naruto had done what she thought he did, then she'd let it go. Oh sure, the embarrassment was more than enough to make her want to punch him until his mind erased any memories from his head, but she was more sensible than that. She knew when her life had been saved. She would be grateful for that. She'd try not to hold it against him. Though she did wonder how many days he had to care for her before Ayame arrived. She probably wouldn't ask. Anyway, she thought of her team. She hoped they were all right. While Kurenai didn't believe in playing favorites, she did admit that she felt closer to Hinata than to Kiba and Shino. Asuma always liked to joke that Hinata's demureness brought out Kurenai's maternal instincts. The Jonin played it off, but she wondered if he was right. Kurenai hoped she would get better soon, then she could be out there with Naruto. She would look for others and restore whatever order there was to this cursed world. The door opened, which interrupted the silence in the room. Ayame stepped through. Naruto-kun, you're awake. Thank God, she said before she threw her arms over his neck. Ayame-ni-chan, that hurts. Naruto exclaimed. Embarrassed, Ayame released him. Sorry. Your bag was kind of heavy, but I moved it to the living room. How are you feeling? You passed out right in front of the door. She replied. Naruto sighed. Let me go wash up and get some food first. I'll go over everything else later, he said as he stood to his feet. He wobbled for a moment, but he found his footing and left. Ayame and Kurenai glanced at each other. Did I interrupt something? The former asked. I honestly don't know, the latter replied. The blonde opened the door to his bathroom and gave himself a wash. Truth be told, he didn't remember the bath that much. Lukewarm water, a bar of soap, and a brush of the teeth, that was all he got until he sat at the table. His brunette friend entered the living room and placed a bento in front of him with some chips and juice. Yet, he might as well have not even seen it. All he could see was Kiba's corpse and Hinata's head, both moaning from the afterlife, cursing him for his weakness. Naruto, what's wrong? Obviously something's bothering you, Ayame said. The light of a candle was all that kept them light as they sat together. Naruto shivered. Nothing wrong, Ayame-ni-chan, he said slowly, almost as if to make himself believe what he was saying. Don't lie to me, Naruto. I've known you most of your life. I know when something's bothering you. Tell me, the ramen waitress insisted. I said it's nothing. I'm fine, Dadbao, he returned. No, you're not. Yes, I am. Naruto-kun. I said I'm fine, damn it. Naruto screamed as he slammed his fist on the table. He widened his eyes. Slowly, he looked up and he dreaded the shock, hurt, and pain on his friend's face. Naruto's face contorted in sorrow. He slumped in his chair. His head bashed on his table. He hoped the light of the candle was dim enough to hide his face. How do I tell her, Ayame-ni-chan? Naruto asked, his voice laden with unbearable anguish and frustration. Ayame's gaze softened when she heard the distress in Naruto's voice. His words became uneven and croaked. His sobs reached her ears. How do I tell Kurenai-san that I saw 2 members of her team dead? Naruto asked. The brunette widened her eyes and her hands covered her mouth. What? Naruto found 2 members of that Jonin's team. She quickly understood what unnerved him so much. Her shock over his outburst quickly faded away while she watched him clench his fists. Kiba and Akamaru are gone. They're nothing but bones now back at the stadium. Hinata, she's, Naruto spoke of Hinata's fate and Ayame sat utterly stunned. No, how could such a fate befall such a sweet little girl like that? First, the village. Then, her father. Now, Naruto's friends. Everything was coming down around them. The grief and sorrow threatened to overwhelm them as the unforgiving wind blasted outside. Yet, both stiffened when they heard violent coughing, from around the corner. They turned and they noticed Kurenai wheezing in pain as she clenched her chest. She coughed so hard blood expelled from her mouth. Naruto and Ayame quickly moved to help her. Whether she knew it or not, Kurenai dove into Naruto's chest and wailed, her cough spasming her pain in hot bursts. Kurenai felt her mind break in 2 pieces. She heard the scream from Naruto and got up to investigate. She just made it around the corner when she heard Naruto speak. Hinata, she's dead. She was beheaded and an earthquake dragged her and the shinobi district into the ground. The Jonin felt a deep pain in her chest. Like she had been stabbed with a hot kunai, she dropped to the ground and coughed. Her croaks were so hard that she thought her heart would burst from her chest. Tears fell down her face. Images she wished not to see of her student's body rampaged through her mind like a moving movie screen. Hinata, Kiba, they were both dead. They both. Kurenai gripped Naruto's t-shirt as she cried. She screamed and screamed, but the winds blotted out her voice. She had failed them. Why was she still alive if she couldn't even protect her own students? What the fuck was even going on in this forsaken world anymore? The Jonin felt the bile rise in her mouth. It mixed with the blood and violently ruptured over Naruto's clothes. She gripped him hard. Her Jonin's strength was not to be underestimated. They were gone. They were gone. Why were they gone? Hey, that's it. I'm in hell. We're all in hell. Kurenai laughed to herself before her world became dark. She fell in Naruto's lap and passed out, the stress of her sickness and the pain too much for her recovering body. The next time Kurenai woke up, it was morning. She slowly opened her eyes. She turned her head to her right and noticed Naruto sleeping on the side of the bed. She frowned for a moment until she looked up at the ceiling. Hinata, Kiba, 2 of her students were dead. Plus, the news of what befell the former was unlike any she'd ever been given. The Jonin thought of her students. Hinata always had confidence issues due to the strict nature of her family. She wasn't the most talented person out there, but she had her own strengths and resolve. Kurenai always wanted to try and give Hinata that reason to strive to do better. It was by now she understood that the reason was the boy sleeping at the foot of her bed. Then, there was Kiba. Oh, yes, there was Kiba. The headstrong, brash, sometimes inconsiderate, alpha, of the group. For all his faults, Kiba was a hard worker. Kurenai admitted it was rather hard to teach him, Hinata, and Shino since the three were so attuned to their family's style. None of them were adept at genjutsu either. Still, there were other things she tried to teach them. Kiba took to the fighting well. Of course, she disapproved of his trash talk, especially to a comrade like Naruto, but his fighting genius spoke for itself. Had he lived to his adult years, he would have become one of the most feared taijutsu shinobi in the world. She didn't hear any news on Shino, but she was out of hope at the moment. It probably wouldn't be long before his body turned up somewhere too. Kurenai wasn't even sure she could stomach the thought. Just thinking about Hinata and Kiba was enough. Kurenai violently coughed. She placed her hand over her mouth while her fit worsened. The pain in her chest was greater than any pain she'd ever felt. When she looked down at her palm, she saw how stained with blood it got. Would this be the same blood on her hands if she held Kiba and Hinata in her arms as they passed away? A hand shook Kurenai from her thoughts. She turned and noticed the Kyuubi Jinchuriki was awake. He grabbed a wet rag and cleaned her hands. He was silent as he worked and she was as well. The Jonin had to admit that something changed about the blonde. Last night, his eyes were filled with dread and weariness. Now, he was filled with a deep, burning inner fire that she'd not seen in many people. Also, she wasn't sure why, but she could see something swirling around him. No, perhaps see was the wrong term. She could feel it deep within her. Something in his body was unnatural, yet it exuded a mysterious strength all the same. How are you feeling? Naruto asked. He touched her forehead. Kurenai stared at her sheets. Was that what you were going to tell me last night? That Hinata and Kiba were dead? She asked. Without speaking, Naruto nodded. He didn't trust his voice to not crack if he did otherwise. I see, the Jonin said. The blonde genin stood up and walked out of the room. Later, Ayame returned with him. The ramen waitress sighed. Well, she's got a fever again, but I think the stress got to her. We don't have a doctor and the Konoha hospital's been torn down. I think we can only pray that she doesn't have any internal bleeding, Ayame said. Naruto slowly nodded. All right, later in the week, I'll make a trip to the hospital. There should be something over there since over-the-counter stuff isn't gonna cut it. Ayame Nichan, give Kurenai-san plenty of fluids. She'll need more rest. I'll be outside, the blonde said as he turned around. Kurenai groaned. I'll be fine. I've rested enough. The Jonin exclaimed. Kurenai-san, Naruto-kun's right. You can't get up yet. The fact that you even got up yesterday wasn't good, Ayame protested. Despite the pain, Kurenai leaned up and pulled the covers off. She swung her legs and landed them on the ground. No, she didn't want to rest. She didn't want to go back to sleep. If she did, then those visions of things she didn't want to see would enter her mind. She wobbled to her feet. She was a Jonin. Kurenai had to take charge. She had to be the one to lead. She needed to protect this genin and this civilian. For her young charges who died, she had to be better. She had to. Kurenai-san, please lay down. Ayame pleaded. I said I'm fine. I know what my body can and can't do. She panted. The genjutsu mistress panted. Her vision blurred. She stumbled her way to the door. Just before she reached it, she felt the very minuscule amounts of her chakra fade away into nothingness. For an instant, her heart stopped. Her instincts flared. They told her of danger, a great pressure that made her fall to her knees. When she looked up, all she saw was an explosion of green aura surrounding the Kyuubi Jinchuriki's body. That mysterious aura flared like a great firestorm while it sucked away the minimum amount of chakra she was even blessed to have. She tried to speak, but no words came out. When she stared into Naruto's eyes, Gone was their blue color. A shade of deep green replaced them. In those eyes she felt small, insignificant, weightless. Get in bed, Kurenai-san, Naruto said, his tone neither angry nor harsh. It was merely spoken like it was just another day. Kurenai shivered. Was it that weird chakra? Was it because she felt delirious? She didn't know why, but his voice sounded like a crashing chorus of thunder. Whatever strength she had was used to barely keep her conscious. How could she have known that the young boy's chakra slowly engulfed her own eyes, filling her body, and making her quiver? The words that came from her mouth formed before she could even properly register them. Yes, Naruto-sama, she uttered. The room remained quiet for a moment. Ayame stared at Kurenai in shock and so did Naruto. Both failed to properly understand the words that came out of her mouth. Unfortunately, they couldn't think on them because Kurenai's eyes rolled into the back of her head and she passed out. She fell on top of their futon. The ramen waitress moved. She touched the Jonin's cheeks. The brunette breathed a sigh. She must have been more delirious than we thought. Don't worry, Naruto-kun. I'll get her into bed, Ayame said. Alright. Just give me an update when I get back, the blonde said. Ayame nodded. With that done, he closed the door behind him, grabbed his things and walked outside. What the hell was that? Naruto thought as he jumped on the railing. The dusty winds blew in his face before he dashed off. Naruto ran to a corner of the village he knew was deserted. Kurenai's odd behavior aside, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki had one goal for today. Hell, a goal for the rest of the week. Find out what the hell this damn chakra was good for. That was 2 times Naruto almost lost his life. He didn't know how he got home both those times. Granted, the one with Ayame he felt he'd done pretty well, but yesterday was the worst he'd ever felt. Fear stopped him from acting out against those things back in the shinobi district. He felt powerless when all those bugs nearly overwhelmed him. If this was the case, then why was he even alive? Why did he even save Kurenai and Ayame? If he couldn't protect them, then they'd all be dead anyway. If he kept this up, maybe he wouldn't be returning home at some point. I gotta figure out how this stuff works. Naruto thought. Hours. Many frustrating hours passed by for Naruto as he tried to make the green chakra within him work. Yet, the first day he went to bed with nothing but frustration. That said, he quickly catalogued what went wrong. So the chakra, for whatever reason, wasn't used for making jutsu or for climbing onto surfaces. He'd tried the cage bunshin many times. Like, a lot of times. A lot of times. He even tried the summoning technique, but that provided nothing as well. This led him to believe that whatever this chakra was, it wasn't useful for combat. Then what the hell is it used for? Naruto grumbled to himself as he went to sleep. The second day was when Naruto decided to try something else. Instead of using the green chakra to fuel its own power, he decided to try using it to fuel the powers he already had. Now that was where the interesting stuff happened. The green chakra was indeed chakra, but it was a different type of chakra. It was like, damn it, there was some sciencey term for it that the blonde couldn't place. Well, fuck it, for lack of a better term, it was an intensifier of sorts. Since jutsu didn't work, for whatever reason, Naruto decided to channel the green chakra directly into the reaches of his body. He'd seen Lee and many other wielders of taijutsu do this. Yeah, it was like normal chakra, it could enhance natural abilities, but this was even greater than what normal chakra could do. When the blonde threw a kunai, it sailed for miles. When it impacted a building, it brought that building to its knees. He could see further than the great walls of Konoha. He could run as fast and as far as he thought possible. He could lift and grab things heavier than he could without the chakra. It enhanced all of his natural abilities. That had to be it. Yet, there was a problem. This green chakra, the backlash was immense. When he had released himself from its effects, he nearly passed out. His chest burned. His arms and legs ached. Blood dripped from the corner of his mouth and his eyesight blurred for about an hour. The backlash was just as great, if not greater, than when he first used the Kyuubi's chakra. All he knew was that, despite his joy at having something he could use to fight, he couldn't fully rely on it. It was rather wild, untamed. Each time he used it, he felt something primal, bestial, hungry, powerful seeping into the very edges of his mind. It only ever spoke one word. Anything else was a large, heavy, primordial roar just like the Kyuubi's. Dominate. That word Naruto remembered so clearly when he rested. It didn't sound like some pass of thunder. No, it sounded like a pass of wind, a common sound, the type of voice you'd associate with someone unimportant. Yet, it was always there, always waiting, always watching, always tempting. For the next 5 days, Naruto worked with this green chakra. If nothing else, he prided himself on his work ethic. When he wanted to train, he'd fucking train until his arms ached and his legs fell off. Yet, no matter how much he trained, he couldn't get rid of the backlash. In fact, the longer he used it, the longer it got. Unfortunately, it rained for one entire day, so Naruto was stuck inside. Kurenai stopped bleeding, but Ayame continued to give the woman treatment. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki oversaw some of that, but he mostly spent his time in the living room. This was because he'd been using the green chakra for something else. Naruto meditated. Yeah, it doesn't sound right. Nevertheless, exercised his mind with the intensifying qualities of his new chakra. Naruto saw memories of all the things he'd experienced. Some he'd like to forget. Others he wished he hadn't forgotten. With the green chakra amplifying his brain, and his memories, Naruto remembered all of the lessons he got from the academy. Every taijutsu lesson, every ninjutsu lesson, and every genjutsu lesson. Everything seemed to intersect with him at different points in his life. The green chakra massaged his brain, stirred up everything he'd ever done, seen, smelled, heard. Some were too far back to recall. Yet, there was one he remembered. How did he even forget it? The Hokage residence. Despite the severe headache, Naruto walked over to his map and wrote on it. Now that he thought about it, the Hokage mansion had been destroyed by the stone faces. However, in case of invasions, there were select bunkers hidden throughout the village. Naruto didn't remember that, but back when Iruka was talking all about those safety procedures, he mentioned them. The stone faces, for example, were one of them. Clearly, it wasn't the smartest one, but in order to get people there in a hurry, it was the most optimal. That said, Naruto remembered there was something beneath the Hokage mansion because he snuck down there once. He'd been caught by the Sandaime and gotten in trouble. When he asked what was down there, Sarutobi said, "A place I hope that'll never need its lights turned on." Naruto didn't know what that meant, but he'd like to try now. Well, that said, the damn mansion was rubble now. How could he find it? Still, I guess it's worth a look, he thought to himself. The next day, Naruto went out and simply surveyed everything. On the roof of a building, he stared at the shinobi district through a pair of binoculars. Those creatures continued to patrol the area. He watched them closely, carefully even. Kakashi was always on about that, know your enemy, stuff. No better time to know his enemy than now, he figured. The massive earthquake fissure from a few days ago eagerly showed its after effects. Buildings had been bashed into each other, the hills of bodies slumped over like slabs of meat for a butcher, and debris littered the ground. Eyeless and tongueless heads rolled in the wind upon the sands of the walkways. A rain tarp over his body to protect him from the wind, Naruto wrote down what he observed from these creatures. For lack of a better term, he just decided to call them bone crawlers. It wasn't hard to figure out why. They fucking crawled, like, everywhere. Clearly, they didn't eat. Or he assumed they didn't eat because he'd watched them for at least 6 hours, but they never bit into any of the bodies that littered the ground. They were very adept and nimble. Like a shinobi, they could leap across buildings without sight or sound. How they did this, he didn't know. They also typically traveled in fives. Four usually followed behind one. They made noises or clicks from somewhere in their bodies. Unlike last time, none of them screeched, but he assumed that was because there was no threat. Instead, they seemed to rip the heads off the decaying bodies and take them somewhere. As far as he saw, there were only those five. He waited to see if more would come, but they never did. Yet, as he observed them, Naruto stared at the growing mist hanging over the shinobi district like a plague of death. His enhanced mind pondered their movements. Why are they staying over there? Aside from that thing in the Chunin exam stadium and those bugs in the fissure, I haven't seen anything else out here. Why don't they just take over the civilian district? Naruto thought to himself. If he treated them like animals, then he guessed it could be territory. They had what they needed, so maybe they didn't need to expand anywhere else. Maybe there was something here he wasn't getting. Not once, not one single time, they didn't even consider coming to his part of the village. In fact, dare he say they almost seemed adamant to avoid it. The thought that there might be something in his part of the village did worry him, but what could he do? He couldn't exactly go out finding it. He'd had enough close calls for the entire week. Once the day was finished, Naruto moved back inside. He noticed Kurenai was at the table along with Ayame. Both greeted him. Though the genjutsu mistress was still moving sluggishly, the fact that she was moving at all made Naruto glad. Kurenai had stopped coughing blood after a while, but it was clear the news of Hinata and Kiba's deaths shook her greatly. Welcome home, Naruto-kun. What have you found? Ayame asked. Yo Ayame Nichan, Kurenai-san. Well, I've got a bit of an idea, Naruto said as he took off his dusty clothes. He took a seat in his chair. Oh, before that, Naruto-kun, the water jugs and bottles in one of the apartments are starting to get low, Ayame said. Naruto pulled out a notepad and wrote that down. There were still plenty of places to loot water jugs and bottles from. Alright, I'll take stock when I can, he replied as he took out his map and laid it on the table. Ayame passed him a bento and some juice. She gave one to Kurenai as well before she got her own. The three stared at the map while Naruto tapped one of the spots he marked with a pen. Kurenai-san, you're a jonin, so you'll probably know. I know there was something beneath the Hokage mansion. Gigi told me about it. Can you tell me what it is? He asked. Eyes turned to Kurenai. She stared at the spot Naruto marked and sighed. Normally, I would have said that's confidential, but I don't think anyone's gonna blame me if we don't follow protocol. There's probably no one left alive with the authority to court-martial me anyway. Not like there's a place to hold one either, she replied slowly, almost depressingly. The black-haired woman rolled her neck and leaned forward. Hokage-sama said it was a series of tunnels that led to deeper places in Konoha. I've never been down there myself, but I know all the major shinobi facilities in the village are linked to that tunnel. The Anbu headquarters, the Forest of Death Tower, and other important facilities are connected to that tunnel. It also leads to some other places, but I wasn't authorized to know, Kurenai answered. Naruto and Ayame blinked. There were places that even Jonin didn't know about. You're going to investigate? Kurenai asked. Naruto swiftly nodded. Yeah, the apartment's getting weaker by the day. It won't be long before it falls down. I've got to find us another place that won't get melted so easily. That was why I went to the Chunin exam stadium where I found Ayame Nichan. I'm the only one who can actually fight right now, so it's only natural that I should go right. He asked. Kurenai had to admit she was impressed. Was this really the kid that dove into combat without a plan? He definitely wasn't what Kurenai thought he was. Well, they say adversity builds character. And should you encounter any more of these creatures mutating in the village? Kurenai asked. Both noticed Ayame shiver in dread at the thought. I've found a good way to fight them. Besides, I'm only investigating Dadbao. Besides, with the fall of the stone faces, I might not even be able to get in through the Hokage mansion. I sure don't know where the Anbu headquarters are. To get to the Forest of Death, I'd have to go all the way to the Shinobi district again. I don't know what the earthquake might have done to it, he replied. But how are you going to? Ayame stopped when Naruto smiled at them. Don't worry, I'll figure something out. I swore to protect you both and that's what I'm gonna do. I'll find us a safer place, he said earnestly. So honest was his reply that neither Kurenai nor Ayame knew how to combat it. His words felt reassuring, even in these deplorable circumstances. It felt nice to them both. And if the Hokage mansion doesn't work out? Kurenai asked. Naruto tapped another part of the map. Well, there is the red light district. I know a few casinos with underground bars, and entertainment tunnels. The way the world is now, staying somewhere high isn't gonna help us. Hell, sometimes I'm nervous with us staying on this floor, Naruto replied. Slowly Kurenai nodded. That made sense. Not knowing when some of these buildings would fall and crumble into dust at any given moment. Naruto, how do you even know about the red light district? Ayame asked, an odd smile on her face. The blonde rolled his eyes. Please, Ayame Nichan, you're talking to the guy who didn't have a bedtime growing up. Saw many things, worked for some of the places too, he said. You worked in the red light district? Ayame asked. The young genin shrugged. The stipend for orphans wasn't as great as you think it was. That barely covered the cost of my textbooks, shinobi gear, and other stuff. I needed the money for food and other clothes. How do you think I got so good at dodging Chunin and Jonin? I did rush jobs all the time. No one's gonna suspect a kid of carrying cargo. It wasn't until I became a genin that I made enough money to quit the lifestyle, he explained. The ramen waitress and Jonin glanced at each other again. Neither knew what to say to that as well. Kurenai felt rather bad. She would like to help, but she was still incapacitated. By Naruto's accounts, the environment was rougher. She was already sick. Hell, she couldn't even make it to the door a few days ago. Though her fever had lowered again, she knew it'd be some time before she started throwing kicks and punches. Plus, there was something that disturbed her. No matter how hard Kurenai tried, she couldn't gather her chakra. She thought that her chakra would have returned by now, but she didn't even feel 1% of what she once had. Hell, the chakra she could feel was the bare minimum that a human needed to keep themselves alive. She actually tried to gather her chakra, but that caused a pain so intense she thought she almost died. It felt like her body nearly exploded from the inside out. So great was the pain that she passed out for an entire day. She wondered if Naruto felt the same thing. Surely, he'd tried to cast jutsu at least once. That said, Kurenai kept it to herself for now. They were already worried about her enough. She didn't need to add to it. Besides, judging from the bags under Naruto's eyes, he was truly trying hard for their sake. With the planning done, Naruto spent the rest of the day going over what he observed of the bone crawlers, trained, and gave Kurenai and Ayame a wireless radio that he found along with headsets. He'd found them along with other things in the Shinobi district. With this, at least he could stay in contact with them. Naruto also set up a training board for Kurenai. It wasn't much, but at least she could practice her throws. He also took the time to help Ayame practice with kunai and shuriken. They couldn't take any chances. She'd have to be capable just like them. When he was gone, he tasked Kurenai with overseeing the brunette's training. No one argued. And Kurenai, when you get better, I've got something I wanna show you, Naruto said. Her interest piqued. The Jonin quickly nodded. Night began to settle over the ruins of Konoha. Once again, the three noticed how cold it was. Naruto lit some candles as best he could, but they didn't do much except fill the entire room. Kurenai fell asleep after being given her medicine. Before they fell asleep, Ayame told Naruto that they were all out of the medicine that they'd been using. The blonde sighed. Though they did have more medicine, he thought he'd need to make a trip to the Konoha hospital eventually. His thoughts drifted him off to sleep. The next morning, he got dressed. Ayame prepared breakfast with what tools she had. She also packed Naruto his lunch for when he was outside. Kurenai was still asleep and he wanted to get a head start into the day. Even when he woke up, it was still cold outside. He decided to bundle up. Naruto switched on his headset. He adjusted the sound and the radio frequency. Alright, the plan was to look into any instance of the Hokage mansion. Then he'd find water. If he had the time, he'd go to the hospital to pick up whatever he needed. Of course, the more casual looting wasn't out of the window for the day either. Once he was geared, Naruto pulled up the door. "Be safe, Naruto-kun," Ayame called. He gave her a thumbs up and then left. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki landed on a nearby rooftop. It was so cold, he could see his breath. When he looked at the sky, the putrid green-yellow dusty air was gone. In its place were clouds of dark gray. The wind blew faster. The village was quiet. When had it ever been so quiet except for the freezing wind? Wasting no time, Naruto touched his earpiece. "Ayame Nichan, do you read?" "I read you, Naruto-kun," Ayame said over the line. "Good, I'll be sure to make regular updates," he said, his voice muffled by the scarf he wore. The blonde dashed towards the ruined buildings of the Hokage mansion and the Hokage stone faces. He remembered being here before. Now, it just seemed like a distant memory. A memory of the dead civilians who hid in the faces during the invasion. Hey, even that seemed so far away now. It probably happened close to a month ago by now. As he ran, he thought of his apartment. It wasn't getting better. Actually, one of the spare apartment rooms crashed into the lower floors. Luckily nothing was in there, but that only made him realize that he was running out of time. It wasn't holding as long as he thought it would. It wouldn't be long before he said goodbye to his home as well. After some time, Naruto landed on the ground before the crushed buildings. Unlike last time, there were no bloodstains. They must have been covered up by the wind and sand or melted away by the acid rain. Either way, it was just as lifeless as the rest of the village. He stepped over the fallen gates and entered the compound. He looked at the Hokage stone faces. A few sculpted sides had been melted from the constant rain and weather. It wouldn't be long before they crumbled to dust as well. He tried not to think about it. "Alright, time to get to work," Naruto said as he stared at the mountains of debris. He did a quick scan of the area for danger. Once he found none, he raced to another rooftop. He took out his binoculars and scanned the shinobi district. He was surprised. Huh, they're gone. Where did they go? Naruto thought. The bone crawlers weren't anywhere in sight. For nearly the past week he'd been observing them. They always stayed out till late. They were out very early in the morning. Why would they be gone now? Though worried, Naruto moved back to his task. For the next coming hours, hard work and labor was the young genin's burden. He pushed and pulled debris out of the way. Fallen stone, and splintered wood, shattered remnants of monuments, Naruto moved them all. Beneath his mask, his breath was hot, but his body shivered. It was very cold outside. Naruto groaned as he lifted a large piece of wood. There was no longer any strain on his body from his fight with Gaara. He knocked it over with a resounding crash. His goggles blocked the flying dust from getting on him. "Find anything?" Ayame asked. Naruto grunted. "Nothing but dust and wandering ants. I've been out here for 6 hours," he replied. He leaned against a cracked wall and took a breath. Look around the area where the Hokage mansion fell. It's a tunnel system. It's not capable of moving itself. Naruto was a little surprised to hear Kurenai on the other line. He followed her instructions and moved to the spot where he thought the Hokage mansion once stood. It was a little hard to tell. Between all the natural disasters, nothing was where it once stood. After about 2 more hours, his efforts were rewarded. "It's here. Or at least, I think it is, Naruto said. It took some digging from all the sand and dirt, but he finally found two metal doors with a large seal over them. Thanked Kami. So what will you do now? Investigate. His former ramen-making friend asked. He should probably come back. The seal on the door is very complicated. All Jonin know how to open it, but a genin can't. I know how to open it, Naruto said, cutting off Kurenai. Quote. What? Kurenai asked. Though the two ladies weren't around, the blonde nodded. I know how to open it. I can see it, he said. It was true, he could see it. He could see every single piece of the seal coming apart in front of his eyes in hues of green light, just like the chakra he'd been training with. He didn't know how, but it was the same way with the storage scroll. The seal in the storage scroll, the seal on the metal doors, he could decipher them like they were simple locks. Don't ask him how, but he could. He could see the intricacies of the matrices and the unraveling of each piece. All he had to do was touch the seal and his chakra did the rest. He didn't even have to command it. It just worked. The seal became undone and the doors unlatched. They revealed a large ladder descending into darkness. Now, forgive Naruto if he didn't readily jump at the chance to dive in. He'd had a fill of dark places for a good little while. It's open, he said. What? That's impossible. How did you? Apologies, Kurenai-san, but we'll have to save the questions for later. These don't exactly run on the best battery. Naruto grabbed the door handles and opened them. It was a long shot and he was running low on hope these days. Yet, he was hopeful that some people could have escaped into these tunnels. Did he expect otherwise? Probably not. However, he wouldn't be him if he just gave up that easily. Suddenly, Naruto shivered. His gloved fingers got so cold they actually began to hurt. When did it get so cold? Is it snowing? We aren't in the winter months. Naruto was too busy shivering to tell who said that. He looked up and he saw that the statement rang true. It was snowing. He held out his hand and tiny flakes landed on his gloves. For a moment, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki smiled. Though this definitely wasn't the time of the month for snow to be falling, it was rather nice to see. However, it didn't stay that way for long. Slowly, Naruto was sure his arm was getting heavier. It was probably the clothes, but he didn't remember wearing anything as heavy as he was feeling now. When he looked down, unbridled fear ran through his heart. What the? He growled as the snow began to splice itself together. White strands of frozen water stuck to each other and quickly began to spread like some strange fungus growth. Like hundreds of crawling worms, or creeping ants, they formed together. They stringed up his arm in a violent rush almost as if to try and overtake his body. Naruto cursed as he used his other hand to try and wipe the snow off, but it quickly began to spread on his other hand. Both arms were quickly becoming encased as the sickening strings of cold wrapped around his clothed hands. By the grace of Kami, Naruto was able to wiggle his hands out of his gloves. He stepped away as the strings of snow fully wrapped around the fingered material. They fell to the ground frozen solid before they cracked and crumbled into nothingness. What's going? Naruto didn't get the chance to finish. He shivered again. Now his back felt heavier. He turned his head and he watched as more snow piled on top of each other. Kuso. Even the damn snow's trying to kill me. Naruto thought. He quickly grabbed his earpiece. Ayame Nichan, Kurenai-san, stay inside. Don't touch the snow. Whatever you do. Naruto growled as he struggled to get out of his clothes. Naruto-kun, what's going on? Ayame asked. The snow. It's alive. Naruto yelled as he threw off the clothes he was wearing before the tendrils of snow could fully wrap around him. Naruto, slow down. Snow can't be alive, Kurenai replied. Fine. Whatever. Just don't go outside, he emphasized as he threw his coat away and jumped through the doors in the ground. He then quickly closed them and sealed then shut. He could hear the way the snow and sleet landed on the doors. He could also hear the crawling, creaking of metal it made as the snow, like some kind of otherworldly creature, crawled along the ground. Ayame Nichan, Kurenai-san, come in. Do you read me? Naruto called over his mic. There was no response. The lining of the walls must have prevented communications from getting through. The distant howls and dripping of water unnerved the blonde. It was completely dark where he was. He also didn't know how long it was going to snow for. Could something like that even pierce the doors? Were Ayame and Kurenai alright? What if the snow crushed through his house? They'd have no protection. Ayame Nichan, Kurenai-san, come in, Naruto said nervously. More static. For about 5 minutes, Naruto called out but received no reply. He wanted to open the doors and check. He wanted to open the doors and look. He wanted to open the doors and run. If they died too, he'd be alone again. Was he too hasty in looking for a place to stay? Maybe he should have just run back. Anything would be better than this constant fear of worrying. The snow got heavier. Naruto actually thought he heard hail from the way it was beating against the door. A little worried, he took a step back. If by chance it did break through, then he hoped he'd be far enough away. Naruto inhaled and then exhaled. Easy, Naruto Uzumaki. Alright, the place is boarded up. They also have plenty of supplies. We were running low on water, but they should be able to get enough between 2 people. They also have juice if they need it. I'll just hope that they're fine. I'll wait a few days, Naruto thought before he heard something rumble from within the stone-clad walls around him. Swiftly, Naruto pulled out his flashlight. He flicked it on and stared at his backpack. It wasn't great. He had only packed for a day's trip. Never mind that half his food was gone from the lunch he'd eaten earlier. He only had a little bit of water and half of his food. How long was he going to have to stay here? After some self-contemplation, Naruto grabbed his backpack and stood to his feet. He looked at the stairs which led into the deep, dark tunnels. He swallowed his fear. Thoughts of what could lay in this darkness unnerved him. Yet, he pushed on. He couldn't let his fear stop him. Besides, if the place was free, then it was much safer than his house. Naruto walked down the steps and into the encroaching darkness until it smothered him. He waved his flashlight around the area. The air was cold, but he figured that was because of the wind. He cursed to himself. His coat had gotten taken by the snow, which left him without much covering. He continued down the flight of stairs. Well, at least I don't feel like I'm being followed this time, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki thought to himself. He walked down for a rather long time, he felt. How long he walked he wasn't sure. The dark oddly warped his sense of time. His fingers touched the stone walls. He absently noted that stone slowly gave way to steel and metal. The distant howls of wind flowing from below him caused him some concern, but not too much. He finally reached the bottom. His steps echoed through a series of long tunnels and interconnecting lanes. As expected of a bunker which led itself beneath the village, there were no lights on. He didn't expect them to be. More than likely they ran out of power when the storms hit. With no one to turn them back on, they must have just stayed dead. Well, it wasn't like Naruto could get them back on, so he decided to keep moving. He rubbed his arms. He was cold. The young genin knew no direction he was going. He turned down a series of hallways that led to nowhere. He didn't suppose there'd be a map of the area in a place like this. All those elite shinobi probably trained to navigate this place with their eyes closed or something. Naruto pointed up his flashlight. There was a soft creak of the tunnels that made them rather creepy. He wouldn't say why, but it's what he felt. He turned down another hallway. Once he turned down that hallway, the blonde stopped. There was a glimmer, a brief flashing light that reflected off the lens of his torch. He almost missed it. It had been a long time since he'd seen it. A trap laid above, triggered to pull several kunai hidden in the ceiling or alert, someone living down here. It wasn't just one either. There were dozens. Numerous explosion tags, fire tags, chakra sealing tags, and more weapons littered the hallway. Cautious, Naruto turned out his flashlight. True, it made it harder for him to see the traps, but there was no way someone wasn't monitoring them. If they were an enemy, he'd do the same as back in the Chunin exam. Give them no reason to be certain of his position. Though the tunnels turned dark, Naruto, for some strange reason, could still navigate them just fine. He didn't know why, but he felt he had a better perception of things since he'd done his training. He touched the wall and he could feel where everything was. The kunai, the shuriken, the explosive tags were where he could sense them. Well, he couldn't see them, but he could sort of picture where they were. He stepped over one trap. He then stepped over another that had been double layered. A piece of wire was close to slicing into his neck. Whoever made these traps, they were good. Not nearly as good as him, but good. Once he maneuvered his way through the traps, Naruto turned down another hallway. Honestly, just how many places could these go to? Suddenly, Naruto stopped. He slowly reached into his backpack and pulled out a kunai. He heard footsteps. It was still far away, but he could hear something about the weather outside. He found an open grove in the wall and stepped into it. He then took out a metal pin and threw it at the opposing wall. The pin made a loud clang. The voice stopped. A light pierced through the tunnel he was just in. Footsteps grew louder. "I'm telling you, I heard something," one of the voices said. It sounded like a woman. It could just be the mice again. They link to wander these dark tunnels sometimes, another one spoke. This one was definitely a man's voice, but it sounded oddly familiar. That said, forgive Naruto if he didn't leap for joy. End of the world or not, he couldn't be sure if there were only Konoha shinobi and civilians live. Oto and Suna forces could still be here. Mice. Then you go first. I'll hold the light so we can see. Despite how cold he felt, Naruto could feel the sweat pouring down the side of his face. He'd never been one for stealth. Kakashi would always tell him that he never acted very shinobi-like. The blonde always took it for a compliment rather than an insult. He tried to breathe. His mind raced. His chest thumped. He clenched the kunai in his hands. It was dark so he couldn't see very well. The light from one of the others shined down his tunnel. The shadow of a young man got closer and closer until the Kyuubi Jinchuriki struck. The blonde didn't think any further. He just jumped into action as he was infamous for. He surprised both enemies. The genin grabbed the young man. He was the closest. He then swung his kunai and tipped it right near his captive's throat. "Don't move or I'll kill him," the young genin threatened. He pressed his blade into his captive's throat, pricking it with blood for emphasis. The light shined in his eyes. The young girl growled, "Do it and it'll be the last mistake you ever." "What? Hey, it's you. That kid that beat Neji at the Chunin exam." The girl exclaimed. Naruto frowned. Well, it wasn't impossible for someone to recognize him. Hundreds of people saw him triumph over the Hyuga prodigy. Nevertheless, he didn't withhold his grip. "Who are you?" he asked. The woman held up the flashlight over her face. Naruto widened his eyes. Though she looked worse for wear, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki noticed that it was Neji and Bushy Brow's female teammate. She looked a bit pale from when he last saw her. Her hair had also been let down. He didn't know why, but he spoke. "You're Neji's teammate," Naruto exclaimed. "Tenten at your service. Now, how about you remove the kunai and start apologizing to your friend there," the girl named Tenten said as she pointed to the blonde's captive. He looked down. The flashlight showed a boy about as pale as Tenten. His face was mostly covered, but Naruto could never forget that torn gray jacket. He also couldn't forget those awkwardly black glasses on his captive's face. He'd only seen one other person wear glasses similar to those. That person was much older and way more perverted. That same stupid sensei who fell for his harem jutsu. Yet, this one in front of him merely looked at him stoically. "It's good to see you as well, Naruto." You can release me now, the young man said. Naruto's mouth thinned as he saw an insect fly past his face. Quote,